I was recommended to check out this guy's channel, David Kaylor, on one of my previous Andor videos, and I took a look at it. It looks like he's working on this, masterpiece Andor Rogue One cut that really looks cool. I think it's got a lot of potential to kind of fix a lot of issues. One, I would say Andor Season 3 has kind of 3 primary issues, which I'll get to, and then covering the issues with Rogue One itself, where there's a quality difference in world building between that and Andor. And I think a cut, like a supercut, kind of mashing everything together, cutting out the weak points, adding the strong points, will help kind of smooth everything over. So please, I'll include that in the description below, so please do check that out. The idea behind a fan edit, or to my understanding, is that what we're going to use is we're going to try and use all the scenes that we have in front of us and kind of mess with the timelines, makes this scene, if it comes before or after this, then it kind of changes this meaning. But the idea, again, is that you can't really go back and recreate any new scenes with the actors. So we're going to take everything that we have, likely cut a bunch of stuff out, but see what we can do to try and fix the issues or try and change the story slightly and come up with something new, but also that builds off of what is existing, the existing story that we love, to make it better.
This will appear to be a demotion. You'll have to play the part. It will heat up soon enough. This is good news, Dedra. Ghorman will be yours to run as you wish. You'll only answer to Krennic, and he's got no time for anything but results.
In the comments down below, please do mention, what you would like to change about Rogue One or Andor. If you had a time machine and had a meeting with Tony Gilroy and could sit him down and be like, listen, you need to do this, what would it be? Yeah, let me know down below. I'd love to hear from you guys.
Ghorman is a gift. Take it.
So the first change I would try and make with the Ghorman Arc is to place it on either side of an existing arc. For example, after the heist at Aldhani, maybe Cassian takes on another job for Luthen, and then this other job, before he goes to prison, is to go visit Ghorman, the planet of Ghorman, as Valerian Sky. He does an assessment of Ghorman and then leaves. And you have a number of these other arcs that remain as they are. Maybe Vel's part stays unchallenged. Luthen and Clea's section with the listening device remains as it is. But I want to split the Ghorman arc up. And that means that Cassian goes to Ghorman, scouts it out, comes back, says they aren't ready for a fight, has a disagreement with Luthen, and then goes off, and he's out. And he does this a number of times, so I think it wouldn't look that far out of place. He leaves the Ghorman after the assessment and becomes a tourist and then gets arrested. And this leads right into the prison arc. And you can have this go in parallel with everything going on in Ghorman, along with what they're constructing in the prison, trying to figure out this paranoia, this sense of impending dread that the Empire is building. The only thing we'll need to change then for the scenes is changing it up for Deidre's working on Ferrix, and I think it's possible to make her work so she's actually working on both, or to kind of see like, listen, your attention's divided. I think there's a few scenes we have that we can kind of play off of and show and kind of lead up to, or even have it be a twist. Like, hey, turns out, this is that scene where Jung, the rebel spy deep in the ISB, is revealing that nobody knows what Deidre's been working on. You can move that forward a little bit so that we can say like, oh, she's not just working on Ferrix, she's been working on something else. And we could have it in the infancy stage for the Ghorman arc, so it's not exactly like she's doing the full deal that we see later in season 2, but just the beginning thing. The Empire's doing something, and they're trying to follow the breadcrumbs and figure out where this attention, what's going on from here. And the reason why I want the prison arc in between is because when Cassian goes back to Ghorman for the second time, the Ghorman planet for the second time, I want that time shift to hit really hard. I want it to feel like it's been a long time. So we can have Aldhani, we can have the first Ghorman arc, we can have Ferrix, everything from there, or the prison arc, then Ferrix, and then right at the beginning of season 2, we can even have the section, we'll pull forward the section from Rogue One where Galen Erso is being recruited by Krennic, recruited being put lightly from there. Then it'll actually feel like it's been a long time. It'll feel like, hey, Cassian's been out of this loop, he's been completely taken out of action, and it'll feel like a long time. After he escapes from Ferrix, after his mother dies and everything, he'll get back to Ghorman, and to us, the audience, it will feel like it's been a long time. We can even stop showing the clips of what's happening during the Ferrix debacle, so we feel this, black and white difference between a military occupation and what it's doing to the people of Ghorman. And, my problem with the Ghorman arc in season 2 is twofold. One, it happens so quickly. Season 2 has like 2 or 3 time jumps, and anytime you have really more than one time jump, it really doesn't feel like much of a jump. It feels like you've explained to the audience, it's been a long time. It's been 365 days, and the audience goes, it actually feels like it's been about 5 minutes. And it's really hard to change that, especially if you do multiple ones in a row. And I think putting the prison arc in between will help with that, and will add to the screen time to space it out. The other problem is that while it feels the Empire and Deidre and Syril and Pottergaz and everybody else and Krennic, knowing or not, are working on the Ghorman project, they're working on big, world-changing, cataclysmic things, it always feels like Luthen and Cassian really aren't doing too much in the original Ghorman arc. It feels like the Empire is giving it their all to try and genocide the Ghormans, while the good guys are doing not much. It doesn't really feel good. I want to watch Luthen and Cassian and Vel. I want to watch them do big things. I want to watch them do really cool things. And I get that it's not always going to work out that way. I kept expecting Luthen to be working behind the scenes to try and, do something about the Ghorman. We know what's happening on Ghorman. We know something is happening. Where it's headed is deadly. And so the good guys need to do something. There's this is frantic. And again, it's not always reasonable to expect the good guys will always have an answer for everything. And so I do get that the Ghorman arc, let it be the tragedy, this massacre of the innocents from here. That's great. But the good guys it didn't feel good as the audience from there. I wanted Cassian and Luthen to try and do something big besides just try and shoot Mira. Cassian, it felt like he wasn't really in the assassination attempt. He kind of felt like Syril did to him what he did to Mira. There was a lot of pointing, but not a lot of strong conviction from there. And again, the struggle is not necessarily, I'm nitpicking a little bit about this, but what I'm wanting is I wanted the good guys to feel like they're also prepared, that they're doing something. What I kept hoping for was that Luthen would have the whole massacre, being filmed and being displayed throughout the galaxy. Even if it's like, listen, let's not let this war crime go to waste. And then bam, there you have it seen. Because that seems perfectly in line with Luthen, where he's like, listen, we can't stop this. It's too late. We were too late. I wanted him to look the, audience or Jung or Cassian or someone in the eye and be like, listen, we were too late. We can't stop the Empire. So I'm not going to let this war crime go to waste. Let's use this. And it fuels, rebellion everywhere else in the galaxy. And it would be so good. And again, all of these things I'm nitpicking, part of the reason why I'm doing this for the Ghorman arc is because it's such a good example of great world building. The Ghorman arc has such fantastic aesthetic, the language, that song everybody sings. Actors are amazing. The French resistance feeling works. The language, it feels like its own unique planet. They have, even within the Ghorman people, you have the different kind of factions, different groups arguing with each other. It really feels like its own place. And that's it's so well done for that. And I just wanted it to go the next level. And so in summary, I think we put the prison arc in between here because what it does is it lets you, while Ghorman is happening, it gives an explanation for what Mothma and Luthen and Cassian are doing. Even if Cassian's in jail for half of it from there, it makes sense. He understands because we already have one time skip with the prison arc. And so I told you my issues with the time skips in season 2. We can basically take one of those time skips, and if we meld it with the prison arc, we can let that be one of them. So that way it makes more sense. Because, it turns out Cassian's in jail for a long time, and it feels like it's been a long time. But so then season 2, it helps kind of lessen the issues over there and kind of spread it out from there. It also makes it explanation to my issue that I just mentioned and kind of went over. It's like, what are the good guys doing while this massacre is happening? And it's like, well, here it is. And you can have that kind of play out from there.
This is quite the report. This happened when?
Last night, sir. I knew you were leaving this morning, and I wanted to make sure you had all the available information before your departure.
You've been very busy.
For Syril, for any sort of master cut, I really honestly wouldn't change a whole lot with Syril. I think Syril's arc is actually as a whole is really good. I do think it's missing like 1 or 2 more scenes. I would have really loved it if Syril hadn't shot Cassian and hadn't died there, made it back, and then recorded something for Deidre to find, like a message, something like Nemik's manifesto, Syril's manifesto, and then he got killed randomly or something like that. Because I think as a whole, I wouldn't really change too much with his arc. I think it's missing maybe 1 or 2 scenes in season 2 to really kind of see and solidify this change, because you understand that he realizes he's one of the baddies now. He's no longer in Kansas hunting down, evil lawbreakers and jaywalkers or something like that. He's part of the evil empire, and he's just following orders. And he represents the other side of the people who believe in the empire, as opposed to Deidre. He's here fighting for what he believes for the Empire, for order, for law and order and peace. This glorious idea of peace in the Empire that it represents, because it turns out the Empire is what's maintaining peace within the world. And again, this peace is in quotes, though, as you can see by this massacre. But again, I thought his was overall quite good, and I probably wouldn't change too much with it.
Fellow senators, friends, colleagues.
For Mothma's arc, I really wouldn't change a whole lot with hers. We would probably just, any changes in any sort of cut or anything like that would have to be throughout the other changes I'm making, particularly with the Ghorman arc. I wouldn't really change too much with hers because I thought it was great. I might shorten a few scenes just because some of the party scenes, it did feel like it went on a little bit long, but I did really like her character and her as an arc because, again, she represents the other side of the rebellion. Cassian's off shooting people and all this stuff and everything like that, but she's doing the most important part of building an empire, which is raising and funneling money, because you have to have money to make things work. People can fight for a dream, but they have to eat. They have to have weapons. So I wouldn't really change that. The only thing I would maybe try and do is have a scene after she's on Yavin 4 where she's kind of talking about her daughter or something like that. I don't know if there's a scene in season 2 or season 1 that we can kind of move over there and kind of change the context, just because it does feel like the daughter really gets completely forgotten once Mothma reaches Yavin 4, which again, you could say that she has more important things, and her and daughter were never on good terms to begin with, but I kind of would have preferred that. And I don't know if there's something we could cut and move around so we can kind of button that in so that while she's on Yavin 4, she still does love and is thinking of her daughter instead of kind of it feeling a little bit fallen off at the end. The Mina Rau arc is one that I didn't really care for. I thought season 2 for Andor, the first 3 episodes there were a number of sections that were really weak. And I'm going to move most of this scene towards the end of season 2, and we'll kind of get back at this and I'll explain where I'm moving all this. For the first 3 episodes of Andor, I'm leaning towards either cutting most of the part of the rebels on that planet. Again, I didn't even realize it was supposed to be Yavin 4 until I was, researching, trying to look up all the planet names for this. I would probably show them a little bit smaller part, because I would have preferred if the show had played up them in the Yavin 4 base and it being just disorganized and all this like crazy. That would have been okay, but it just feels kind of random. Like it really felt random. And maybe it's because I wasn't paying enough attention. You could say shame on me. That's fair enough. But I didn't think it quite worked. And I was talking with a friend and he was explaining that scene's really important because it shows how disorganized the rebellion was. And I feel like there's this scene from Saw where he's talking to Mothma that really covered it for me.
Keep hijacking these transports and that will be the least of your problems.
You have no idea where I am. All your spies and infiltrators. You think I'd still be alive if I hadn't learned to bend them as I wish?
It's the Empire that's after you, Saw, not us.
If only you could fight, as well as you lie.
And for me, that did it because, Saul is kind of a part of the rebellion, particularly because, Luthans keep meeting with him and trying to motivate him. They're doing all this stuff. And I think that did enough for me. That did a good enough job, leaning towards this is the different factions for the rebellion. And we even see this come up again in Rogue One where, Mothma is saying that actually Saul's, crazy antics are actually causing them a lot of issues. We see this fractured nature of the rebellion from there. But again, I would probably just cut a few of the sections down and trim it up a little bit. And now as we get towards the later end of Andor's season, kind of changing things, I probably won't change, the rescue mission for Mothma or anything with Kalea. And I probably wouldn't change that too much. But as we get into the later end of season 2 for Andor, of course, we're getting closer to the beginning of Rogue One. And the first act of Rogue One really felt like I was watching World War Z on fast forwarded. We're just jumping all around the galaxy from planet to planet to planet to planet. And I'm not really sure what's going on. It's just, oh, hey, we heard this thing here, and they're off there. And oh, hey, we heard this over from there. And so what you do is try and take some of the jumps and mix it into season 2 of Andor. For Cassian's story in season 2, there are a few sections and episodes where he's kind of just living normal life on base, or he's also living normal life and he's on Coruscant with Bix. We have these two things where there's kind of like they're trying to recreate this sense of normalcy of a normal life. Cassian's not doing anything crazy. And you have these scenes where he's gambling and being a normal life. You can take these sections where he's jumping off from Rogue One and intersperse it a little bit more with some of these episodes in Andor. And what it does is it means that it feels less jerky. It also balances it out. So we have like some downtime, we're going on a mission. We have some downtime, we're going on a mission. It makes it feel a little bit more like that, as opposed to Rogue One is just jump. And season 2 for Andor, there's a number of episodes where it's like, hey, it feels a little slow. Not bad slow. It just feels like we're just kind of chilling at the base, and that's fine. And, you would have to be careful for the trickle of information. We have A, which leads to B, which goes to C or anything like that. You could play with it and maybe even have it. We don't go from A to B to C. We could learn about A and C, and then while we're journeying something else, we figure out B. The details are where it may not work like I'm imagining it, but I think that would be an option that you could really improve upon.
You're a hard man to find, Galen. But farming. Really? Man of your talents?
One scene from Rogue One I would definitely pull forward, and I think I mentioned this, is Galen Erso's recruitment. I would put it probably right after season 1 of Andor and let the audience begin to connect all the pieces as we're going to begin to see we're building towards, the Death Star, the plans for the Death Star. Rogue One suffers from pacing, and we can use season 2 from Andor to help space it out and help the audience slowly build an understanding for it. But most of what I would try and cut from Rogue One is unfortunately cut down Jyn Erso's role a good amount. Her role in the story feels really weird. It's like they couldn't figure out if they were trying to avoid her being a Mary Sue, which she is not a Mary Sue, and try and keep her from being the prodigy, but then they don't really do a great job explaining why she's there giving orders and anyone's really listening to her. She's good in a gunfight and daring and very, very smart, but is everybody else dumb that she's supposed to just be able to take over and become the leader? And it just didn't mesh well, especially after Andor, where we get to see what Cassian is and what he's capable of. Why is she in charge instead of Cassian? So I would probably try and cut that down a good amount and let Cassian know. Maybe Cassian's just letting her take charge, and that's fine because we know how great Cassian is, but it feels weird that for some reason she comes in and just is able to see the path for the rebellion and when nobody else is. And so what I would do is probably try and cut all these scenes down where Jyn is explaining this stuff and the rebels just aren't getting it. They're just a little bit too dumb or too thick-headed to get it. There's these rebel leaders that are really inexplicably dumb. Mothma's not really able to, make clear decisions or anything like that. I would really love it to see if we can make it so that way they present all the evidence for the Death Star and Mothma. If you can cut a scene in there and Mothma goes, yep, go for it, and just ends there, and they go, it's a suicide mission, let's go. We've seen Mothma sacrifice everything and build so much of the rebellion so that when Jyn arrives at the council table and tells the rebel leaders what to do, it doesn't feel great. And I get that the rebellion is having leadership issues, but I'd much rather have it if we can cut some scenes and show that Mothma is being presented the information and then she kicks everybody else and makes an executive decision and then ... And we kind of connect the dots that, oh, okay, maybe they're not just making it up. It's kind of a clandestine suicide mission that they volunteered for, that Jyn really wants to do because of her father. Cassian wants to do it because of everything we've seen from Andor, and we can see this play out, and I think that would be really good. And this runs directly into one of my big issues in the discrepancy between Andor and Rogue One, and that is intelligence, the Empire's intelligence and information gathering.
Death Star.
Who else knows?
Partagas.
No, I want the names. I don't know.
This is absurd.
Resistance is absurd.
I am not a rebel spy.
Oh, at the moment, that is the only plausible scenario. How does one balance such passionate competency with the mindless decision to confront Luthen Rail on your own? If you're not a rebel spy, you missed your calling.
Because the Empire in Andor is vicious. They are brilliant, they are smart, they are constantly looking and on the hunt for rebels and everything like that, putting to peace. They're almost always a step ahead. We can see everything with the Ghorman. It's just this brilliant evil plan that they've come up with. And then in Rogue One, they basically are acting surprised when they're Robert Oppenheimer at their, Los Alamos. is bombed and they're just completely shocked and surprised. And then their version of the Library of Congress, where all these archives are held, are attacked. It's just like, why doesn't the Empire know what's going on? This is the most obvious, it should be the most obvious thing going on. And so what we do to fix this, to help do this, overall intelligence and more specifically information, there seems to be a lack of it. And if you cut season 2 of Andor and run a few scenes in parallel or right after the other and move it, a little bit closer, again, we're merging the beginning of Rogue One with the latter half of season 2. For Andor, we have Krennic being very suspicious of Dedra being a rebel spy, either incompetence or just being a rebel spy, Partagaz shooting himself, and what we can do is merge this into the fact in Rogue One, the Empire has no idea what the rebels are doing. They have no idea where they're going to attack, and not until do they literally show up do they have time to react. And this works. We can explain this if the audience has the understanding that the entire ISB is collapsing in on itself, and that Krennic probably hates them all and thinks they're all rebel spy ridden. I mean, after all, if Jung is a spy, Dedra might be a spy, and she's been in charge of spy hunting. What is going on? You basically, at that point, it would make sense for Krennic just to completely wipe everything and start from scratch. Because Partagaz is dead, who's going to take over? Everybody, you can't trust anyone. Krennic's not going to promote anyone else until he fully understands who he can trust, or even clean house and start all over again. And this gives a great opening to the rebellion to strike, and it fully explains what I think is one of the weakest points of Rogue One, is that the Empire seems really stupid. And it makes sense, though, if you merge these two to run kind of in parallel so that we can see, hey, everything is falling apart. Krennic's in charge. He's not we don't see him making any brilliant decisions to rebuild, the spy network. It's just all falling apart, which is why the Empire is having such a hard time. They're expanding too fast. They're trying to take too much. Jung even said it himself. We're being overwhelmed. We can't keep up.
We're arresting too many people. We can't take it all in.
Go on.
And this explains something in Rogue One, why the Empire has no idea what's going on. And now we're kind of moving in again. We're moving into where we're combining season 2 of Andor and Rogue One, and we're moving a little bit more back into into season 2 of Andor. And for the Mina Rau arc, I told we would get back to it, and I want to come back to it. And I've never really cared for how Bix left for the relationship between her and Cassian. It really did feel like a number of sections and scenes in season 2 are rushed, and I felt like I just missed. There's like 2 or 3 scenes that are completely missed, and for her to just up and disappear. It makes sense, but it felt weird. It felt like something was missing. It can work. I mean, I think it did to some degree, but I didn't really care for it. So what I'm thinking we change for Mina Rau is, the gang is all on Mina Rau, Brasso, Bix, and Willman, everybody's there. Cut it to basically where, they're waiting for Cassian to arrive. So their group is there. They're being harassed by the Empire. They're in hiding. Cassian shows up with this ship, shoots a bunch of them, and then leaves. He doesn't take them with him. I think there's some scenes we can cut. I know there's a few scenes where it shows them in the background while he's piloting that plane, but I think we can show it to where he shows up, shoots them, and then leaves. The plan was for him to steal the ship and then get picked back and pick the others up, and we'll cut the scene down with the other rebels out, and on the way he's supposed to grab the gang, but he just shoots the Empire and then leaves. And what this does for me is this does for a few things for the story. This lets Brasso live. We're going to skip the part where he dies because he never should have died. He should live forever because he and Chief Hine are 2 of the greatest side characters ever created. Like, just look at Syril's face and just begin to understand how he doesn't realize and appreciate this man in front of him.
But they were murdered.
No, they were killed in a fight. They're in a brothel, which we're not supposed to have, the expensive one, which they shouldn't be able to afford, drinking Rivnog, which we're not supposed to allow. Both of them supposedly on the job, which is a dismissible offence. They clearly harassed a human with dark features and chose the wrong person to annoy. I suspect they died rushing to aid someone in distress. Nothing too heroic, we don't need a parade. They died being helpful. Something sad but inspiring in a mundane sort of way.
And what it does then, if you have this where Cassian just swings by and then leaves, is it makes the Bix and Cassian separation feel a little bit more natural, because things don't always happen the way you want. Bix leaving felt sudden because she was living. They're basically kind of like husband and wife. And we find out later, you know, she's pregnant. And then for me, it really did feel like it kind of came out of nowhere. But if you do it this way, it makes sense why it feels sudden and that it came out of nowhere. You know, this isn't planned. This is what happened. Cassian makes a decision. I'll come back for you guys. You guys will be fine. I'll draw the Empire. I'll leave. And then we can even have the letter scene and explain why she's not coming back. You know, the plan was for him to draw a fire and for her to join. Why, you know, this explains why she's staying on Mina Rau. She's not joining them on Yavin 4. You know, we can even have, and then shortly after, if we move this towards the latter end of season 2, we can then bridge it within shortly thereafter, Cassian's decision to go and, you know, work harder with the rebellion and maybe even to go on this suicide mission, you know, because maybe he's still recovering from the fact that Bix isn't going to join them. You know, Cassian makes the choice to leave her. She'll be safe for now. He can draw the attention and then she can exit the show and they can have their own story. And we can have that scene at the end where she's holding his baby and we can kind of let this play out, where you can almost then overlap it with Luthen's dream, you know, Luthen's speech about, you know, a sunrise that I will never see. And we can kind of let Bix walk off and you can see the future from there play out. You can even have it happen if need be. We can move that scene to after the end of Rogue One, where, you know, after Cassian's died and is exploding, we can let and see, we can show the characters for who will see that sunrise that Cassian will not, because Cassian very much carries on Luthen's dream in terms of everything. He's very much Luthen's disciple, if you want to talk about it. They're both fully in agreement with their methodology and with their vision for a new world. And the main change I would make regarding Darth Vader and Krennic is I would probably cut out everything with Vader right up until we see him attacking that rebel ship when they're trying to escape. Because I think that reveal is so good, and it would be awesome if you could kind of put in throughout the entire story just these little hints and suggestions that Vader is coming, Vader is after him, and let this go up. Because the parts with Vader and Krennic, what we're doing is we're showing the discord within the Empire. But if we have the scene with Partagaz where he kills himself, if we have the scene where Krennic is confronting Dedra and he's basically trying to figure out what's going on because the entire ISB is falling apart and he doesn't know what's going on, and then we immediately cut over and the rebels are attacking. We kind of use that to explain for the reason why this empire, which up until this point has been so competent, but now all of this conspiratorial, you know, it's turning into, with the secret police and everything like that, they're turning against each other and eating themselves, and now they're falling apart, and now they don't know what to believe. They don't know what's going in, you know. And this scene pulls Krennic down and basically shows the discord within the Empire, that everything's falling apart. It explains why the Empire can't catch a break, you know, everything going on. And then it means that we don't have this humiliation of Krennic. He's still a feared bad guy, but he's kind of almost sympathetic to some degree in terms that he's trying to hold everything together, but despite all this, it's all falling apart around him, and it's satisfying to watch because, you know, he is evil despite everything from there. And then it leaves you, of course, with the moment where this big reveal for Vader. Vader is coming, and it's just, you can have it hit all at once, and you can really feel, especially because Andor, we haven't had any Jedi. We haven't had any in season 1 and season 2, and then we get into Rogue One. We have that one guy who's like kind of a Jedi, but not really. And then as we get into the very end, we see a full Jedi warrior at the height of their power, and it's just this terrifying moment where Vader's coming through and just killing everyone, and we can see that play out, and it would be awesome. It would be such a cool build up to let that happen there. And then I would cut out that weird scene with Princess Leia where she kind of smiles while everyone around her is getting murdered, and she smiles and goes, "Oh, hope." And meanwhile, you know, again, everybody's been sliced in half in front of her. I would probably try and cut that out and just let it so that, okay, they shoot the pod out and everything from there, and we kind of let it down, because I do think Rogue One has all these moments where they're trying to do such a cool thing with a Star Wars story, and then they shoot themselves in the foot, and it just seems to repeat and repeat and repeat. But yeah, I think that really covers most of it. Let me know what you guys think. You know, kind of what you think. What would you rather change about season 1, season 2 of Andor to Rogue One? I probably, realistically, I didn't say this enough, but I probably wouldn't have changed. I'm very hesitant to change Andor season 1 because I think it's just absolutely amazing. But yeah, let me know. What do you think? Does it seem plausible? You know, if you could change something about Andor, what would you do? If you could redo Rogue One, you know, especially in the wake of Andor, what would your focus be? Let me know what your thoughts are in the video below. Please do like the video, and please do subscribe. Really, really helps in the algorithm. Basically makes or break anything. And yeah, thank you to everyone who made it for this far. This is a bit longer than I normally do, but I really do appreciate your time. And I wanted to go ahead and link something else. I saw this video by this guy, SWFT. From there, I'm not sure how to really pronounce it, but I'll link it down, and it has this super cut of everything from Andor, and it just and its focus is on the Empire, and it's just amazing. I got chills watching it. It's just so good, and basically it's amazingly well edited. I'm in awe of people who can do that, and it ties so much together of what made Andor so good and why this world is just, it's so fun to talk about, to think about, and watch stuff on. It just makes it's so rich, and there's so much there. So I really appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'll see you in the next. I'm Jeff Cassidy, and this is Fiction Applied.